Hello, today we're talking to Dr. Ariel Armony, who's director of the Center for Latin American Studies at the University of Miami, and he's just been named Senior Director of International Programs and Director of the University Center for International Studies at the University of Pittsburgh, where he'll be taking up his duties in the next few months. But today, with Dr. Armony, I want to talk with him about the informal city or informal cities. Ariel, let's talk a little bit about the informal city. What is an informal city?
Well, informal cities can be described as settlements that are frequently characterized by organic physical patterns that are built incrementally over time as the needs and circumstances of a community change. So, this is basically an idea that these are urban areas that experience spontaneous growth, and for the most part, they lack fundamental state services.
Right. Okay. Why should we care? What's
Well,
important? What's important to us as students of Latin America and urban policy throughout the world? What's important for us to know about informal cities?
first of all, it's absolutely critical because 24%, so almost a quarter of Latin America's urban population is estimated to be living in informal settlements, and these are figures as of 2012. So you are talking about uh, many people, millions and millions of people who live in informal cities. So that's the first reason why we should care.
Right.
This is a major urban issue, and I want to know that I'm not talking about an urban problem, and we will be talking about that because we shouldn't consider this a problem as many talk about, but it's a very important issue. And also, we should care because there are many policy challenges that have to do with informal cities. Of course, policymakers care about this because you're talking about millions of voters, and these are citizens who are living in conditions that are very precarious and that they really need government services.
And so it's a question principally of bringing government services to them, legitimizing and legalizing their status. Where do we begin?
I think that we should begin with a very fundamental issue is that for the most part, when we look at maps of cities in Latin America, and this is something that viewers can do as an exercise, it's very interesting, they will find that in many cases, the areas where we see what we know that there are millions of people living in formal cities usually are presented as green spaces. What we see is that actually these areas are off the map, literally off the map. We do not even include them in maps. And so one of the important elements is to start having these informal cities as part of the agenda. A project that we studied as a result of our first report on informal cities actually does this. This is a project that the Center for Latin American Studies has developed with the School of Architecture and the Center for Computational Science at the University of Miami to develop software and a series of steps to start mapping informal cities in Latin America. So that's the first element. We need data about these places because we know very little about them.
Okay, but what are the benefits of the informal city? It's not a problem, you said. That's the way we used to talk about shanty towns as a problem to be eliminated or eradicated. But you suggest that there are significant benefits to us of the informal city. What would some of
Yeah,
those be?
yeah. Some of the there is a very interesting new set of research that has been conducted over the last few years that shows, for example, that informal cities are places where we see a lot of innovation in terms of culture. Brazil is a very good example. In Brazil, we have lots of new music, even a new type of music called funk that was actually originated in the favelas and has become a very, very important and commercially important form of music. That is, they are very important in terms of cultural production. They are places that are a very important source of innovation, and many times the government is slow in terms of recognizing and trying to deal with the challenges of regulating some of these innovations. For example, one good example is the motor taxis in the favelas in Brazil, where of course there is a need for transportation, but you can't have cars transporting people, and so there is a very vast network of motor taxis, which is a very interesting and necessary innovation, but it is very complicated. The government is not very supportive of this kind of innovation because they want to regulate it. So we are seeing these clashes between these forms of innovation and the difficulties in turning these informal then innovations that become part of the informal economy to connect them to the formal economy and to regulation.
And is it fair to say that the informal city, the informal settlements represent a significant source of labor for the rest of the city and for the formal economy?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is, there we have people who provide services in a multitude of areas, and therefore they are a very very important component of the formal economy. And even though in many cases they actually participate in both, that is. They are part of an informal economy that connects to the formal economy. Very much, I was thinking that in light of the current discussions that we have in the United States about immigration and the fact that many claim that without the labor, the immigrant labor that we get, the agricultural sector in the United States will not survive. I think that we can make a parallel to the population in informal cities. That is, without this population in informal cities, I think that the so-called formal cities may not be able to operate
So
because they provide essential
yeah,
services in many, many sectors.
there are important linkages between informal and formal cities that we shouldn't ignore. Let's go back. We have to close our conversation for today, but let's go back to where you began with the significant numbers of people throughout Latin America. 24%, you said. Do you have an example that you could propose to us of a city that is, that's the average, the city that has the highest or among the highest percent of informals?
Well, we see very large informal cities in Brazil. So that's, of course, in Rio, Sao Paulo. We have seen a very large increase of informal cities in around Caracas. So these are some of the examples where we see a large concentration of people living in these informal settlements.
Very well. Thank you. Dr. Ariel Armony, Director of the Center for Latin American Studies, University of Miami. Thank you so much for talking with us about the informal city in Latin America.